The desert is a place that does not forgive. At night, the silence presses in so tightly it begins to feel like a weight, a pressure on your chest. The wind stops, the coyotes stop. The hum of the earth itself seems to die, leaving only a kind of emptiness. Those who live in the American Southwest will tell you that this is when you should be most afraid. Not when the coyotes howl, not when the owls call from the cliffs, but when they don't. When the desert stops breathing altogether. The traveler had been driving for hours. He was tired, so tired that his eyes had begun to blur. He could feel his consciousness threatening to slip away, lured by the rhythmic thrum of his tires on cracked asphalt. He reached for the radio, dead static. Of course, he hadn't had a signal for miles. Then he saw it, a shape on the roadside, too thin to be human, too still to be animal. He slowed. Its head turned 180 degrees, vertebrae popping, until its hollow sockets locked onto his eyes. He slammed the gas. The figure stepped into the road. The car died. Darkness swallowed him whole. "Help me," a voice outside his window, his sister's voice, but she was 4 states away. Something dragged claws along the door with a sound like tearing flesh. "Come out," it whispered, the voice warping deeper, inhuman. The scraping stopped. Silence. The car roared back to life. He sped down the road, heart hammering, refusing to look in the rearview mirror, because he knew what he'd see there. A figure, seated in the back seat, smiling. He never spoke of it, but across Navajo land, whispers persist, of creatures that wear stolen skins, of voices in the dark, of claws scratching at your door. The Navajo call them Yi-Naldlushi. We call them something else, Skinwalkers. And now that you know their name, they know yours. There are words that are meant to be carved in stone. They are heavy, permanent things, intended to outlast the flesh of the hands that made them, to speak across silent centuries. And there are other words that are meant to be carried only on the wind. Words so light, so dangerous, that to write them down, to give them a physical form, would be to anchor a nightmare to the waking world. These are the whispers that cling to the high, lonely mesas of the American Southwest, a story that resists being told. Humanity has a primal need to name the abyss, to give a label to the shapeless fears that lurk in the periphery of our understanding. A name is a cage, a handle, a way to classify and control the unknowable. We believe that anything with a shape can, eventually, be understood. But some names are not cages. Some names are invitations. In the sacred language of the Diné, the entity that haunts the twilight roads is known by a name that is not a name at all. It is a description, a diagnosis of a spiritual sickness so profound, it warps the very fabric of reality around the afflicted. When it must be spoken, when the walls of silence can no longer hold it back, they call it Yi-Naldlushi. Let us dissect this phrase, for within its grammar lies the architecture of the horror. Yi-Naldlushi. It translates roughly to, with it, he goes on all fours. Consider the cold, clinical precision of that statement. It does not say the monster that walks on all fours. The structure is more sinister, with it. This implies the use of a tool, an external object, a conduit of terrible power. The it is the source of the corruption, the animal hide, the cursed powder, the dark knowledge. It is an instrument of violation. He goes on all fours. Not walks or runs, but goes. A term of deliberate, almost medical vagueness that suggests a horrifying locomotion. This is the movement of a human frame being forced into a quadrupedal shape, an act of profound biological and spiritual heresy. It is the gait of something that was once a man, but is now propelled by a force that twists his very bones into a new and terrible geometry. The name is not a monster's title, it is an observation report on a soul's final damning experiment. This phrase, this key, is guarded by a taboo of immense weight. To the traditional Diné, the universe is not a collection of inert matter. It is a finely tuned web of connections, a living, breathing symphony of energy. A name is a resonant thread in that web. To speak the name Yi-Naldlushi is to pluck that thread, sending a vibration out into the unseen world. It is a signal that travels from the warmth of the firelight into the cold, listening dark. It is like striking a tuning fork in a room full of sleeping beasts. Imagine a child, in the deep of a winter night. The wind outside is a living thing, a chorus of grieving spirits pressing against the thin walls of the home. The child, emboldened by the perceived safety of the fire, asks the question that has been hanging in the air, a shadow in the corner of their mind. They use a name they overheard from the worried whispers of the adults. The reaction is not anger. It is something far more frightening. A sudden, heavy stillness descends. The quiet conversation of the adults ceases. The rhythmic work of a mother's hands on a loom comes to a halt. The very air seems to grow cold and dense, the firelight shrinking in on itself. The grandmother, her face a living map of seasons and sorrows, will not look at the child. She stares into the heart of the fire, as if seeing something move within the flames. Her voice, when it comes, is barely a whisper, lower than the sound of the wind. "We do not use that word," she might say. "It has ears. It listens for its name on the wind. When you speak of it, it turns its head. It wonders who is calling to it from so far away. It wonders if you are lonely." The lesson is absolute, delivered not through punishment, but through the shared, suffocating weight of a collective fear. The child learns that this is not a story from a book. This is a matter of immediate physical and spiritual hygiene. They learn that the boundary between their world and the world of the witch is as thin as their own breath on a cold night. They learn that certain knowledge is a heavy cloak, and that a single careless word can be a tear in that cloak, letting in a cold that can never be warmed. This lesson is reinforced daily by the land itself. The desert night is an ocean of black ink. Beyond the small, trembling island of light cast by a home, the darkness is absolute, a presence rather than an absence. Every strange sound, the cry of a coyote that ends on a note that is too human, the scrape of a dry branch against a windowpane that sounds too much like a fingernail, the muffled sound of dirt being kicked up just outside the door when the dogs are silent, is now filtered through the lens of this terrible warning. The taboo creates a state of constant, low-level vigilance. It is a form of spiritual discipline, a reminder to move through the world with a quiet reverence, lest you call something from the shadows that cannot be reasoned with, cannot be fought, and cannot be sent back. The belief is that the Yi Naldalushi exist in a state of predatory waiting. They are drawn to chaos, to sickness, to grief, and to the sound of their own name. To speak of them is to create a beacon. Think of it this way: your life, your home, your consciousness is a single warm candle in an infinitely vast and dark cathedral. The flame is small, fragile. To speak the name is to intentionally send a plume of dark, fragrant smoke rising from that candle, a signal, an offering, a spire of scent that travels through the immense dark stillness of the nave. Perhaps the entities lurking in the far corners of the cathedral will not notice. Perhaps they are preoccupied, dormant, miles away. But perhaps one is close. Perhaps it was just passing by, its attention drifting. And your signal, your plume of smoke, is the thing that catches its interest, the thing that makes it stop and turn its unseen head and begin to move silently through the pews in your direction. In the modern world, this concept of verbal restraint is alien. We are a culture that shouts. We name, catalogue, and broadcast everything. We believe that by exposing a fear to the light of inquiry, we rob it of its power. We create documentaries, podcasts, and endless online discussions, picking apart the legend as if it were a faulty machine. We treat the Skinwalker as a puzzle to be solved, a cryptid to be proven or debunked by grainy photographs and shaky video footage. From the traditional Diné perspective, this global conversation is an act of spectacular, almost suicidal recklessness. Every article written, every video produced, every casual mention in a horror story is another voice calling out into the dark. Another plume of smoke rising in the cathedral. They are all striking that tuning fork, over and over, sending countless vibrations out into a world they do not understand, a world they refuse to believe in. They are conducting a massive, uncontrolled experiment in spiritual invocation, without any comprehension of the forces they are tempting. The silence of the Diné elders on this matter is not born of ignorance. It is born of a knowledge so deep and so terrifying that the only sane response is to remain still and silent. It is the primal instinct of prey when a predator is near. The taboo is a shield, forged over generations of fearful respect. To them, the noise of the outside world discussing their most profound cultural terror is like watching strangers laugh and shout while walking through a minefield, oblivious to the danger they are courting for everyone. And so, the name remains a paradox. To the world, it is a thrilling piece of folklore, the Skinwalker. To those who live on the land where the legend was born, it is a key to a door that must never be opened. A diagnosis for a man who, through some terrible act, has learned to go on all fours, propelled by an it that has hollowed him out from the inside. The fear of the name is, in truth, the fear of what the name represents, a contagion of the soul, a corruption so absolute that it grants a person the power to shed their own humanity like a soiled garment. The silence surrounding it is a quarantine, but this raises the most troubling question. If this entity is not a spirit or a demon, but a human being who has chosen a different path, what is that path? What ceremony of damnation, what ritual of desecration must a person perform to earn such a terrifying name? The answer lies deeper in the silence. It lies in a part of the tradition that is even more closely guarded than the name itself. The witchery way. It is not a path one stumbles upon in the dark. It is a path one carves into the dark, with intention, with precision, and with a philosophy as coherent and complete as the one it seeks to destroy. To understand it, one must first stand in the light it seeks to extinguish. In the traditional Diné worldview, the universe is a place of profound and intricate balance. It is a vast, interconnected loom upon which all of life, seen and unseen, is woven. Every star, every stone, every person, every thought is a single, resonant thread. The guiding principle of a righteous life is to maintain this balance, this harmony. It is a state known as Hojo, to walk in beauty, to live in harmony, to be a part of the great symphony. The healers, the medicine people known as the Diné, are the caretakers of this harmony. They are the weavers, the tuners, the spiritual artisans who spend their lives learning the complex ceremonies, the songs of creation, the sacred architecture of prayer required to mend the tears in this great tapestry, to restore those who have fallen out of balance. Theirs is a path of restoration, of light, of communal well-being. Their power comes from their submission to this beautiful cosmic order. And for every path, there must be a shadow. For every intricate knot of creation, there must exist the possibility of its deliberate unweaving. For every medicine person who dedicates their life to Hoju, there exists the possibility of one who chooses its perfect and horrifying antithesis. This is the witch, the anti-Ihni, and their path is the witchery way. The witch is not an outsider. This is the first and most crucial terror of the legend, the one that lodges deepest in the communal psyche. The witch is not some creature from another dimension, not some demon born of primordial evil. The witch is a healer who has curdled, a medicine person who, looking upon the sacred knowledge meant to preserve life, saw only a blueprint for controlling it. They are individuals who have been initiated into the same holy rites as the Diné. They know the songs that can soothe a fever. They know the prayers that can guide a soul. They know the pressure points of the spiritual world. But at some point, in the quiet of their own heart, they made a different choice. The motivations are a litany of the darkest impulses of the human soul, but it is not simple, brutish evil. It is a cold, intellectual dissent from the principles of creation. It is the voice that looks upon the harmony of Hoju and sees not beauty, but constraint. The voice that sees the medicine man's restraint as weakness, his humility as a failure of ambition. It is the gnawing hunger for the wealth of a neighbor, the acid of jealousy over another's success, the obsessive lust for revenge against a slight, real or imagined, and beneath it all, perhaps the most seductive reason of all, a desperate, clawing fear of personal annihilation. A terror of death so profound that they would seek to live beyond a natural span, to steal years from others, to become a parasite on the life force of their own community. They see the power to heal and ask, why can this not be a power to harm? They see the intricate laws of the universe and ask, why can these not be broken for my benefit? The descent begins with small, private acts of perversion. It is a relearning of their sacred craft. They take the holy chants, the songs of creation that align the singer with the benevolent holy people, and they sing them backwards. This is not a meaningless act of rebellion. It is a meticulous process of spiritual engineering. A song sung forward is an act of creation, of weaving. A song sung backward is an act of unweaving, of dissolution. It creates a sonic void, a pocket of anti-creation into which chaotic forces can be drawn. They take the intricate patterns of the sand paintings, sacred maps of the cosmos meant to be a temporary home for healing spirits, and they alter them. They render them with deliberate, corrupting flaws, a line drawn where none should be, a sacred color replaced with a profane one. They are taking a spiritual circuit board designed to channel divine harmony and deliberately short-circuiting it, turning it into a conduit for sickness and discord. Every tool of the healer becomes a weapon in their hands. Medicine becomes poison, prayers become curses, healing ceremonies become rituals of desecration. This dark apprenticeship leads them to the first great transgression of their path, an act that solidifies their choice, the violation of the dead. The witch requires ingredients, catalysts for their dark power. These are not things that can be found among the living. And so, under the cloak of a new moon, when the darkness is absolute, they go to the lonely places where the dead are laid to rest. Grave robbing, in this context, is not a simple act of theft for profit. It is a profound spiritual communion with decay itself. They are not merely disturbing a body, they are interrupting the delicate, sacred process of a soul's journey back into the great whole. They are stealing the peace of the dead to wage war on the living. They seek specific graves, the graves of infants whose life force was potent but unlived, the graves of twins who represent a powerful, natural duality, the graves of those killed by lightning, who died in a sudden, violent infusion of raw celestial power. From the remains they create what is known as adish, corpse poison, a fine grey powder rendered from the desiccated flesh and powdered bones of the dead. It is a substance of pure, concentrated malevolence, a spiritual rust. This is their primary weapon, blown into the homes of victims through cracks in the foundation or down chimneys in the dead of night. It is a poison that attacks the spirit before it attacks the body, causing a slow, wasting sickness that confounds doctors, a string of inexplicable misfortune, a deep and unshakable paranoia that turns a family against itself. It is the physical manifestation of their corrupting influence, a tangible piece of death they can wield. But the witchery way is not a solitary path. The lore speaks of secret gatherings, of covens that meet in places shunned by the living, remote caves that seem to exhale cold air even on the hottest day, the dry stone throats of canyons where sound dies. Here, in the absolute darkness, far from the watchful eyes of the community, the witches are said to convene. They arrive in nakedness, a perverse parody of ritual purity, a symbolic shedding of their human identity. It is also a practical measure to ensure that no one is concealing a weapon against their supposed allies, for there is no trust among those who have made betrayal their creed. Here they plot, they exchange information on their victims, they trade secrets of their dark craft, they perform their backward ceremonies in unison, their inverted chants weaving together to form a net of misfortune they can cast over the community. They are a secret society bound not by loyalty, but by a shared damnation. A cancerous congress where individual evils are magnified into a collective force. These acts of desecration, of poisoning, of secret and corrupting communion are all steps on the path. They are tests. They are a hardening of the soul, but they are not the final initiation. They are merely the prerequisites for a power far greater and a damnation far more absolute. To gain the ultimate power of the witch, to truly become a Yi Naldlushi, a final price must be paid, a price so absolute, so horrifying, that it forever severs the witch from the world of humanity, from the great loom of Hojo. The law is unflinching and unanimous on this point. To complete the initiation into the highest echelons of the witchery way, the aspirant must kill a close blood relative, a sibling, a parent, a child. Let the weight of that sink in. This act is the dark, dense heart of the entire legend. It is the ultimate transgression against nature and spirit. In Diné culture, kinship, K, is the bedrock of society. It is the web of relationships and responsibilities that holds the world together. To sever that bond is to demolish the very foundation of your own being. This is not a murder committed in a fit of passion or for something as mundane as inheritance. It is a cold, calculated ritual sacrifice. It is the final, irrevocable act of rejecting kinship. It is a formal declaration to the spirit world that you are no longer bound by love, by loyalty, by family. You are bound only to yourself and to your all-consuming hunger for power. In committing this act, the witch performs a kind of spiritual self-immolation. They murder their own soul to untether it from the community of mankind. They become a rogue element, a free-floating void in the spiritual ecosystem. They have paid the ultimate price, and in doing so, they have purchased the ultimate power. This final, terrible sacrifice is the key that unlocks the last door. It is what grants them power over life and death, the power to inflict disease from a distance, and most terrifyingly, the power to break the laws of biology, the power to shed their own skin, to dissolve their human form in a mockery of creation, the power to become the beast, and to forever wear the consequences of their choice. The sacrifice is complete. The blood has been spilled on the dry earth, a dark offering to the void. The final sacred bond of kinship has been deliberately and irrevocably shattered. The witch now stands alone, a ghost in their own life, having murdered the part of themselves that was human. They have carved a hole in the fabric of the universe and stepped through it into a place of profound and desolate solitude. And in the vacuum left by their departed soul, a terrible new power rushes in. This is the final cursed reward of the witchery way, the power of transformation, the power to become the beast. This is not the clean, instantaneous magic of a fairy tale, a convenient trick of the light. The lore does not speak of a flash of smoke or a ripple in the air. It describes a process that is grotesque, physical, and agonizingly intimate. It is a biological heresy, a symphony of anatomical horror conducted by a will that has divorced itself from all natural law. Having unmade their soul, the witch must now unmade their body. The process begins with the instrument of their power, the key they have earned through the ultimate act of murder, the skin of an animal. This is not just any hide, taken at random. It is a pelt that has been meticulously chosen and prepared, a vessel for the witch's own rapacious spirit. It is the skin of a predator, an animal that embodies a particular facet of the witch's malevolence. The coyote, the trickster, the master of the twilight edge, whose cleverness is a blade. The wolf, symbol of raw, pack-driven ferocity and relentless pursuit. The owl, the silent nocturnal hunter with eyes that see in the dark, an omen of death that flies on soundless wings. Or the crow, the carrion eater, a creature that thrives on the death and decay of others, its intelligence cold and calculating. The chosen skin becomes a sacrament of damnation. It is cured not with salt, but with curses. It is anointed not with oils, but with the rendered fat of the dead. It is steeped in dark energy until it is no longer just a piece of an animal, but a potent artifact, a doorway between forms. To begin the transformation, the witch takes this ritual garment into a place of absolute darkness, a place where the eyes of the holy people cannot see. They pull the hide over their shoulders, and as the cursed leather makes contact with their human skin, a convulsion takes hold. A full-body seizure that is not a sickness, but a restructuring. It is a process of violent anatomical rearrangement, a perversion of a chrysalis. The lore, whispered in the most guarded of conversations, speaks of the sounds. The sound of bones cracking and popping, not like the breaking of a limb, but like the methodical snapping of dry kindling. The human skeleton, a marvel of engineering designed for upright posture, must be broken and reset. The long bones of the legs and arms shorten and thicken. The clavicle snaps to allow the shoulders to narrow. Vertebrae in the spine shift and realign with a sickening, wet clicking, forcing the torso down into a crouch, bowing the back into an animal arch. The skull itself begins to change. The jaw unlocks and distorts, stretching forward, elongating into a snout, the teeth loosening in their sockets only to re-emerge as sharpened fangs. The human larynx, designed for speech and song, is crushed and reformed, capable now only of a guttural howl, a mocking bark, or the perfect chilling mimicry of another person's voice, a stolen echo used for luring and deceiving. The skin of the witch stretches and splits under the strain, erupting with coarse matted fur that pushes through the pores like thorns. It is a process of excruciating, unimaginable pain. But for the witch, this agony is the final ecstasy of their transformation. It is the feeling of their human limitations being violently, contemptuously torn away. They are not becoming an animal. That would be too simple. too clean. They are wrapping themselves in the shape of an animal, wearing its form like a suit of armor made of flesh and bone, while the cold, predatory intelligence of the human witch remains trapped inside, peering out through alien eyes. This is the critical distinction. A wolf hunts out of instinct. A skinwalker hunts out of hatred. This imperfection, this unholy fusion of human intellect and animal form, is the key to the terror. The transformation is never perfect. The accounts of those who have witnessed these creatures and survived do not describe a natural wolf or a common coyote. They speak of an unsettling, horrifying wrongness, a dissonance that registers deep in the primal part of the brain that knows what an animal should be. They speak of an animal that moves with a gait that is just slightly off, a lingering memory of its bipedal origins. They speak of wolves seen in the periphery that seem to stand up on their hind legs for a moment too long, their posture unnervingly, recognizably human before they drop back to all fours. They describe coyotes whose front paws, seen for a split second in the stark, unforgiving glare of headlights, seem to end in something that looks disturbingly like long, grasping human hands. And they speak most often of the eyes. The eyes are never right. They are not the simple, reflective discs of a nocturnal animal, catching and returning light. Witnesses describe an intelligent, malevolent gleam, a knowing, hateful stare that holds the full weight of the corrupted human consciousness within. To look into the eyes of a skinwalker is to see a human mind looking back at you from inside a prison of fur and fang. It is to see a mind that recognizes you, that understands your fear, and that despises you for the simple, beautiful humanity it has so willingly and violently abandoned. Armed with this new form, the witch becomes the apex predator of the night. They gain the speed of a wolf, the cunning of a coyote, the silent flight of an owl. They can run at speeds that defy physics, pacing a speeding car on a desolate highway with an ease that is both terrifying and insulting. They can leap to the roofs of houses in a single bound, their claws scraping on the shingles. They can crawl through impossibly small spaces, dislocating their newly formed joints to pour themselves through a window or a ventilation shaft. The laws of nature seem to bend around them, frayed by the sheer force of their unnatural will. The fear of this creature, then, is not just the fear of a physical attack from a wild animal. It is the fear of a malevolent, human intelligence armed with supernatural abilities. And this fear breeds a deep, insidious paranoia that poisons the community from within. If a witch can be anyone, a neighbor whose sheep now outnumber your own, a distant relative with a long-held grudge, a rival healer whose practice is failing, then every strange occurrence is cast in a sinister light. The sudden death of a healthy flock of sheep is not just bad luck, it is a targeted, economic attack. The strange, misshapen tracks outside a window in the morning are not from a stray dog. They are the sign of a witch's nightly surveillance. A sudden, unexplained illness that weakens a family is not a virus. It is the work of corpse poison blown through a keyhole. This pervasive fear gives rise to a quiet arms race of spiritual defense. The community does not turn to firearms, for what good is a bullet against a curse? They turn to the old ways, the protective medicines wielded by the true healers, the Diné. Homes are fortified not with locks and bars, but with wards and prayers. Cedar ash, a powerful spiritual cleanser believed to be intolerable to the corrupted, is sprinkled across thresholds and windowsills, a pale, silent barrier against the night's horrors. Prayers for protection are recited, their ancient words forming a shield of sound. Special ceremonies are performed to strengthen the spiritual walls of a home and a family, to reinforce their connection to Hoju, but these measures only serve to intensify the underlying terror. The need for such powerful spiritual protections underscores the severity of the threat, and it reinforces the most horrifying aspect of the entire legend, the theme of intimate betrayal. The witch knows these protections, the witch knows the ceremonies, they know the proper uses of cedar ash, and they know the ways to circumvent them. They are an insider who has become the enemy. They are not an external threat invading the community. They are a sickness that has festered within it. The fear of the Skinwalker is ultimately the fear of your neighbor's shadow. It is the quiet, suffocating terror of lying in your bed at night, listening to the wind howl outside, and wondering if the person you shared a meal with that afternoon is, at this very moment, pulling on a skin in the darkness, their bones breaking and reforming into a new and terrible shape. wondering if their eyes are now glowing with a hateful light, and if their thoughts are focused entirely on you and your family and the warmth of your home. It is the fear that the monster is not only real, but that you may have shaken its human hand just yesterday. The old stories are not just stories. They are living things. They are not memories of a world that was. They are a description of the world that is, just beneath the thin, cracking pavement of the one you think you know. The whispers haven't faded. They've just learned to hide in new shadows, to curdle the edges of our modern, well-lit lives. The fear today doesn't come from a grand, theatrical evil. It comes in quiet, personal moments of profound wrongness, a detail out of place, a sound where there should be silence. It's the kind of fear that makes you question your own senses, your own sanity, a quiet infection of the mind. It starts, often, not with a scream, but with a silence. A rancher wakes, and the air is wrong. It's too still. The familiar symphony of the morning, the roosters, the cattle, the dogs, is gone, replaced by a heavy, listening silence that feels like a held breath. He steps outside, and the wrongness takes on a shape. He finds his sheep, not eaten, but opened, torn apart with a hateful, wasteful rage that has nothing to do with hunger. It's not the work of a coyote. A coyote is an economist of violence. It kills to eat. It is efficient. This is a mess, a tantrum, a statement. Something has come not to feed its belly, but to feed its contempt for him, to show him how easily the things he cares for, the things he has built, can be unmade. It's a message, written in blood and viscera, that says, I was here. I touched your things. This is what I think of your life, and I can come back whenever I want. He stands there in the unnatural quiet, the smell of death thick in the air, and he knows this was not the work of a beast. This was the work of a mind. Then there are the tracks. The dirt outside your home is a page that tells the story of the night, a story you wish you could unread. You find them near the window of your child's room. At first, they look like the prints of a large dog, maybe a wolf that has wandered down from the mountains. But as you follow them, a coldness seeps into your bones, a deep cellular wrongness. The gate is off, too deliberate, too heavy for a creature that lives by stealth. And then you see the change. The clear, familiar shape of a paw pad begins to smear, to elongate, as if the earth itself were melting beneath it. The claw marks, sharp and distinct, fade with each step. The print melts and reforms, step by agonizing step into something else, something human, a bare foot pressed deep into the earth. You can see the arch, the heel, the 5 toes. You follow this impossible trail of man and beast, your breath caught in your throat, and then, in the middle of a wide open clearing where there is nowhere to hide, it just stops. The footprints end. There is nothing. Not a scuff, not a disturbance. As if the walker was lifted straight up into the sky, or simply dissolved into the air. You stand there, alone in the quiet of the morning, staring at the empty space where the trail ends, and you understand that your home was circled last night by something that obeys no laws you know. It left this trail for you to find. It wanted you to know. But the worst part is the sound, the way it learns, the way it uses the things you love against you. The pounding on the door in the dead of night, a single, hard, concussive blow that feels like it could splinter the wood and the bone of your knuckles at the same time. You freeze in your bed. Your wife stops breathing next to you. You wait. The silence returns, heavier now, thicker. You tell yourself it was the wind, a falling branch, then another blow. This time on an exterior wall, right next to your head. The dogs don't bark. And this is the sound of pure terror. They are in the corner of the room, a huddled mass of fur and fear, making a low, choked, whimpering sound. Their animal senses are screaming a warning that you are only just beginning to understand. The thing outside is a predator so far beyond their comprehension that to bark would be an invitation to an unspeakable death. Their silence is the loudest alarm you have ever heard. The pounding moves again. It's on the roof now, a frantic, scratching, circling rhythm, like a giant, angry bird trying to claw its way in. It is the sound of a patient, malevolent thing, reminding you that your walls are just wood, your roof is just shingles, and your safety is a comforting lie you tell yourself between sunset and sunrise. And then, the mimicry. You hear your daughter calling you from the backyard. Daddy. Her voice. It is perfect. You would know it anywhere. But your daughter is asleep in her bed down the hall. You know this. A part of your brain knows this. But another deeper part of you, the part that is a father, feels a pull, a deep instinctual need to go to her, to help her. But some old, buried instinct, a whisper from your own grandfather's ghost, a story he told you when you were too young to understand, holds you back. You stand there, frozen in your own hallway, a prisoner between what you know and what you hear. You listen. The voice calls again, closer this time, from just outside the screen door. "Daddy, open the door. I'm scared." The mimicry is no longer just a trick. It is a weapon forged from your own love. It is using your own heart as a lure, trying to coax you out into the darkness where it is waiting for you. It knows your name. It knows your daughter's voice. What else does it know? The modern world offers its own bleak stages for this horror. The long, empty highways at night. Those lonely arteries of asphalt that connect nothing to nowhere. You're driving, the miles hypnotic, the world reduced to the green glow of the dashboard and the narrow tunnel of your headlights. You see something on the road ahead. A large coyote. It doesn't move. It just stands there, watching you approach. Its eyes catch the light, but they don't reflect it back as green or white. They seem to absorb it and burn it from within, a pair of dull, orange coals. As you get closer, your hand on the horn, it doesn't run. It rises. It stands up on its hind legs, a smooth, fluid, easy motion, like a man getting out of a chair. It is tall, gaunt, its shape a nightmare silhouette of man and beast. It stands there in the middle of the road and watches you, unafraid, its posture intelligent. And as you speed past, your heart trying to beat its way out of your chest, you glance in the rearview mirror. It has turned its head to follow you, and even in the fleeting glimpse, you see its face. It is not the face of a coyote. It is something stretched and distorted, a mask of fur pulled tight over a human skull, with a look of calm, knowing hatred in its burning eyes. Then it is gone, swallowed by the darkness. You don't tell anyone. Who would you tell? The police? They would write a report about a deer and an exhausted driver. A doctor? They would give you a prescription and a pamphlet on anxiety. They would try to patch the crack in your reality with their reasonable, useless words. But you know what you saw. You know that for a moment you looked through a window into a world that runs on older, darker rules, a world that doesn't care about your science or your logic. The real terror isn't in these moments of confrontation. It's in the quiet hours after. It's the feeling of being watched, of being known. It's the slow, creeping infection of paranoia that seeps into everything. It's the question that sits like a cold stone in your gut, a question you can never ask aloud, not what was it, Zrenia, but who was it? Who among the people you know, the faces you see every day, carries this darkness inside them? Who smiled at you at the store yesterday? Who waved to you on the road? Who knows the sound of your daughter's voice? Who among them spent the night trying to call you out into the dark? This is the fear now, a quiet personal infection. It's the understanding that the monster isn't just a story, it's your neighbor, and it's watching you right now, from just beyond the light, waiting for you to make a mistake. There is a patch of ground in northeastern Utah that is sick. A place the earth itself seems to be trying to forget. It's a basin of harsh, dry land cradled by high, watchful mesas that seem less like geological formations and more like prison guards. For centuries, the Ute people who lived on its borders would not go there. They spoke of it in hushed tones, with a fear that was ancient and absolute. They called it the Path of the Witch, the place where the shadows are wrong and the air is heavy with a quiet, predatory intent. They said the land itself was spoiled, cursed, a wound in the world where the barrier between our reality and somewhere else is worn thin, like an old, frayed piece of cloth. Their stories were dismissed as superstition, the primitive folklore of a people trying to give a name to a landscape that was hostile and unforgiving. Then, the modern world rediscovered it. We drilled it, we mapped it, we gave it property lines, and we gave its sickness a new, more marketable name: Skinwalker Ranch. The story, as we tell it now, begins in 1994 with a family, a man and a woman and their children, who wanted nothing more than a quiet life, a piece of land to call their own, a place to raise cattle and watch their family grow. They were practical, grounded people, not given to flights of fancy or belief in the paranormal. They bought the ranch, unaware that they were not purchasing property, but stepping into a cage. They didn't know the land was waiting for them, and they didn't know it was hungry. Almost immediately, the quiet they had sought was broken. The phenomena did not ease them in. It began with an overwhelming, suffocating sense of being watched. A constant, intelligent surveillance, not from a person, but from the land itself, from the rocks, the trees, the very air. Then came the attacks on their livelihood. The cattle began to vanish, not just one or two, but disappearing from sealed pastures as if plucked from the earth by an invisible hand. The ones they found were worse. They were arranged, left in the open as a display, mutilated with a cold, bloodless precision that defied all logic. Not the work of a natural predator. A predator leaves a mess of blood and torn flesh. This was clean, surgical, an act of art, performed by something with a steady hand, a deep understanding of anatomy, and a hateful heart. But the ranch was not content with just the old horrors of the Navajo tales. It was creative. It was an artist of fear. It began to show them things that should not exist. They saw creatures moving in the twilight, just at the edge of the light thrown by their porch. Not just the upright wolf-like things that walked with a human gait, but other shapes, other nightmares. Big, hairy, ape-like things that scrambled over the rocks with an impossible silent speed. And one night the rancher, driving home, saw it. A wolf so impossibly large its back was level with the window of his truck. It stood there in the middle of the dirt road, blocking his path. It was not a creature of flesh and blood. It seemed to suck the light out of the air around it. He fired his hunting rifle into it. Once, twice, 3 times. The high-caliber rounds hit the creature's flank with a dull, wet thud, like striking a mattress full of mud. The beast didn't flinch. It didn't bleed. It just stood there and watched him, its eyes holding a calm, ancient, and utterly alien intelligence. Then it turned and walked away into the darkness, leaving behind only the smell of something rotten and sweet, like old meat left in the sun, and a man whose understanding of the world had just been permanently broken. And then came the lights. Small, silent orbs of light, the color of incandescent bulbs, that would dance and bob in the sky above the ranch. They would follow the family's car down the long dirt road to their home, pacing them, studying them. They would hover over the house at night, silent, curious, and deeply menacing. Sometimes bigger things would appear, silent, black, triangular craft that would blot out the stars, moving with a silent, purposeful grace that felt like a violation of the sky itself. The ancient fear of the witch in the dark was now joined by the modern terror of the silent, watching thing in the heavens. The sickness of the land bled into the house itself. It was as if the walls were just a suggestion, a membrane it could pass through at will. They would hear voices whispering their names from empty corners in a language they could not understand, but whose mocking intent was perfectly clear. Objects would lift from tables and float through the air as if held by an invisible hand. Doors would slam open and shut with violent force, all through the long, quiet hours of the night when the family was huddled together in one room, too terrified to sleep. They came to understand that they weren't just living on a haunted piece of land. They were living inside a conscious, intelligent, and deeply hostile entity. The ranch was a predator, and it was toying with them, feeding on their fear, growing stronger with every sleepless night. After 2 years of this unrelenting psychological siege, they fled. Broken and terrified, they sold the ranch to a man who was not looking for a quiet life, a man who wanted to stare back into the abyss. Robert Bigelow, a wealthy aerospace magnate with a deep and abiding interest in the paranormal, purchased the property not as a home, but as a living laboratory. He founded an organization with a grand name, the National Institute for Discovery Science, or NIDS, and brought in a team of highly credentialed scientists, physicists, biologists, engineers, veterinarians, men of logic and reason, armed with the tools of the modern world. For the next several years, Skinwalker Ranch became one of the most intensely monitored pieces of real estate on the planet. It was bristling with cameras, motion sensors, magnetometers, Geiger counters, and infrared equipment. The scientists were determined to apply the rigorous, dispassionate methods of their disciplines to this nexus of the bizarre. They were going to catch the ghost in their net of data. But the ranch was a trickster. It seemed to be aware of their every move. It was intelligent, elusive, and it seemed to take a perverse, almost playful pleasure in mocking their efforts. Equipment would malfunction in inexplicable ways the moment something significant happened. Brand new batteries, fresh from the package, would drain in an instant. Tapes and hard drives containing hours of crucial footage would be found wiped clean, filled with nothing but roaring, angry static. The scientists, men used to a universe that followed predictable laws, were being tormented by something that seemed to feed on their frustration, that delighted in breaking the rules of their reality. It was a ghost in their machines. It was a flaw in their universe. The Eneides team documented hundreds of strange events, but they were left with no definitive answers, only a collection of high strangeness reports that defied any single explanation. The data was a tangled, chaotic mess of UFO sightings, cryptid encounters, poltergeist activity, and psychic phenomena. It was as if every paranormal theory was true at once, all converging and overlapping on this single, cursed patch of land. Eventually, even Bigelow's deep pockets were not enough to sustain the project, and the intensive scientific study wound down, defeated not by a lack of phenomena, but by an excess of it. The ranch was sold again, and it remains under intense private surveillance to this day, a place of enduring, active mystery. The story of Skinwalker Ranch took the ancient, specific terror of the Navajo witch and broadcast it to the world, but in the process, the signal was distorted. It diluted the original fear. The original legend is a deeply personal, human horror, a story of a neighbor's betrayal, of a healer's corruption, of a community poisoning itself from within. It is a moral, spiritual drama about the darkness in the human heart. The story of the ranch became something else. It became a spectacle, a modern mystery that entangled the Navajo witch with UFOs from other worlds, with interdimensional portals, with secret government conspiracies. The solemn, whispered warnings of the Diné elders were replaced by the sensationalism of paranormal television and late-night radio. The Yi-Nald Lushi became just one more monster in a menagerie of the unexplained. The cultural gravity was lost. The original wound, the story of human evil, was covered over with a new, more exciting narrative of high-tech strangeness and alien visitors. The name Skinwalker was branded onto this place. It became a catch-all term for any strange creature, any bizarre event in the American Southwest. A word that was once a key to a specific cultural terror became a piece of paranormal pop culture, an entertainment. And in this transformation, something profound was lost. The quiet, personal horror of the original legend was traded for a louder, more chaotic, and ultimately less meaningful mystery. The path of the witch, once a dark secret whispered in a single community, was now a global phenomenon, its true, terrible meaning fading with every new theory, every new sighting, every new television special. The ranch took the name, and in doing so, it helped the world forget what it truly, terribly meant. Why does this story persist? In an age of scientific certainty, an age of satellites that map every shadowed canyon and cameras that capture every waking moment of our lives, why does the whisper of the witch in the animal's skin refuse to die? Why does it still hold such a deep and primal power over the human imagination? A power that seems to grow even as the world that created it shrinks. To dismiss it as simple superstition, as the dying echo of a primitive fear, is to fundamentally misunderstand the nature of story itself. It is to ignore the deep, dark, and blood-soaked soil in which the roots of this particular legend are fed. The story of the Skinwalker is not just a monster tale designed to frighten children. It is a mirror, polished smooth by generations of fear, reflecting the most profound anxieties of a people, a culture, and a history. Its endurance is a testament to the power of a narrative that speaks to a truth deeper and more terrible than any single, verifiable fact. At its heart, the legend is a story about the terror of the insider. This is its most potent and chilling element. The enemy is not at the gate. He is not a foreign demon or a creature from the void. The enemy is already in the house. He is sitting at your table, sharing your meal, laughing at your jokes. He is the person whose face is as familiar to you as your own. In a culture like the Diné, where kinship, decay is the very bedrock of existence, the web of relationships and shared responsibilities that holds the world together. The idea of a person who willingly and consciously chooses to sever those bonds, to turn against their own people for personal gain, is the ultimate horror. The witch is not a stranger. The witch is your cousin, your neighbor, your friend who has made a secret, terrible choice in the silent, hidden courtroom of their own heart. This fear of the traitor within is a universal human anxiety, but it takes on a particular and painful resonance when viewed through the lens of history. The story of the Diné, like that of so many indigenous peoples across the continent, is a story marked by a relentless, grinding trauma. It is a history of broken treaties, of forced relocation like the Long Walk, of children stolen away to boarding schools designed to scour their language and culture from their minds. It is a history of the systematic destruction of their way of life and the violation of their sacred lands. And woven throughout this long, painful history is the recurring, tragic figure of the collaborator. The insider who, whether through coercion, desperation, or personal ambition, was tempted into betraying their own community for the benefit of an outside, occupying power. The scout who led the soldiers. The informant who gave up the names of the traditionalists. The one who sold the sacred land for a pittance. The witch, who sacrifices a family member to gain personal power, becomes a potent and agonizing metaphor for this deepest of betrayals. The legend becomes a way to process the incomprehensible pain of being undone from within, a way to give a name and a shape to the horrifying idea that the greatest wounds were not inflicted by the enemy, but by the brother who sided with them. The Skinwalker is the ghost of that historical wound, a ghost that has never stopped walking. The secrecy surrounding the legend, the powerful taboo against speaking its name, is also a form of cultural preservation. It is a quiet, dignified act of sovereign resistance in a world that has relentlessly tried to catalogue, to analyze, to document, and to dissect their way of life, often for its own profit and entertainment. Keeping this story in the realm of the unspoken is a way of drawing a line in the sand. The taboo is a way of saying, this is ours, this fear is ours, this darkness belongs to us. You cannot have it, you cannot understand it, and by trying to, you only endanger yourself and display a profound disrespect for its power. It creates a boundary, a spiritual and intellectual border between the insider who understands the crushing weight of the story and the outsider who treats it as a piece of thrilling, exotic curiosity. And then there is the modern appropriation of the legend. We in the outside world are a culture starved for genuine mystery. In our sanitized, rationalized, brightly lit lives, we crave the thrill of the unknown, the delicious chill of a genuine monster story. We are collectors of strange things, and so we have taken the Skinwalker. We have taken it, and we have stripped it of its cultural context, of its deep moral and historical weight, as surely as a taxidermist strips a hide from a carcass. We have turned it into a cryptid, a paranormal celebrity, another monster to be hunted on sensationalized television shows, another topic for a late-night podcast to be debated between advertisements for mattresses and meal delivery services. We have made it a character in our video games, a monster in our horror novels. We wear the story like a costume, just as the witch wears the skin of a coyote. We do not understand the ceremony, the sacrifice, the meaning behind it. We only see the thrilling, monstrous shape of it. We turn a story about the spiritual horror of greed into a commodity to be bought and sold. We take a warning about the desecration of the sacred, and we desecrate it further with our casual, commercial interest. This misinterpretation, this cultural vandalism, is more than just an offense. It fundamentally obscures the real horror of the legend. The true terror of the Yinald Lushi is not that there is a monster in the desert with glowing eyes. It is the chillingly, intimately human idea that a person, any person, a person you know, a person you love, can make a choice to become a monster. That the capacity for this kind of absolute, self-serving, soul-annihilating evil exists within the human heart. It is a story about the darkness that can fester behind a familiar, smiling face. By turning it into a creature feature, by obsessing over blurry photographs and questionable footprints, by arguing about whether it is an alien or an interdimensional being, we miss the point entirely. We are looking for a monster out there, in the woods, in the dark. But the story has been telling us, whispering to us, screaming at us all along that the monster is in here, in us. That is why the story will not fade, because the fears it represents are eternal and universal. The fear of betrayal, the fear of our neighbor, the fear that our own communities, our own societies can be poisoned from within by greed, by jealousy, by an insatiable hunger for power, and the deep, unsettling fear that the boundary between human and monster is not a wall of stone, but a thin, fragile line drawn in the dust of our own hearts. A line that any one of us, on a long enough and dark enough night, might be tempted to cross. The Skinwalker is not a myth that is fading, it is a truth that is waiting, a mirror that is always there, waiting for us to be brave enough or foolish enough to look into it and see what is looking back. And so, we stop. We have to stop. The telling is over. We have walked a long, dark road together, you and I. We have followed the twisted path into the heart of a sickness. We have whispered the names in the dark. We have looked at things that are not meant to be seen, things that leave a stain on the inside of your eyelids. And in all our looking, in all our listening, we have broken the first and most important rule, the only rule that truly matters. We have been noticed. The old ones, the ones who know, the ones whose silence is a fortress built of sheer, unadulterated terror, they would not say we have been foolish. That word is too small, too gentle for the trespass we have committed. They would say we have been reckless with our souls. They would say that every word we have shared has not been an explanation, but a knock on a door that should never, ever be opened. A sound in a silent, listening house, a floorboard creaking in the dead of night, announcing our presence to the thing that lives there. This is the final turn of the screw, the story that warns you not to tell the story. The only way to be truly safe is to never know, but it is too late for that now, isn't it? The key has been turned, the door has been opened, and something has been invited in. Let us end, then, with one last thought. Not a story about someone else, a nameless face from a forgotten account. Let's make this more personal. Let's make this about you. Right now, imagine yourself where you are, sitting in your chair, lying in your bed. The world outside your window is dark. The hour is late. You are listening to this, to my voice. We have just finished our journey together. You are thinking about the stories, replaying them in your mind. The coyote with the human hands, the voice of a loved one calling from the empty yard. You feel a small, pleasant chill run down your spine, the safe, contained thrill of a well-told ghost story. But the story isn't over. You decide it is time to stop listening. You turn this off. The voice, my voice, is gone. And the silence that rushes in to fill the space is different. It is not an empty silence. It is heavy. It is thick. It feels attentive. You can feel it on your skin, a change in the pressure of the air in the room. You tell yourself it's just your mind playing tricks, the power of suggestion, the natural unease that follows a scary story. You stand up. The sound of your own movement is suddenly loud, intrusive, a violation of the new, heavy quiet. You go about your nightly routine. You brush your teeth. You check the locks on the doors. You tell yourself everything is normal. But you find yourself glancing at the windows more often. You find yourself listening, not for a sound, but for a lack of sound. The familiar, comforting noises of the night outside, the distant traffic, the hum of the world, seem to have receded, faded away, leaving only this thick, waiting stillness. You finally get into bed, you pull the covers up, you lie there in the dark, but sleep doesn't come. Your mind is still racing, still seeing those images, the misshapen tracks in the dust, the glowing eyes on a dark road. You close your eyes, but the images are still there, burned onto the backs of your eyelids, and that's when you hear it. It is not a loud sound. It is not a bang or a crash. It is small. It is subtle. It comes from the other side of your room. A soft, scratching sound, like a single fingernail being dragged slowly down the surface of your wall. You freeze. Every muscle in your body locks. Your breathing stops. You are listening with an intensity you did not know you possessed. Was it just the house settling? A branch scraping against the outside wall? Your rational mind desperately offers you these explanations, these flimsy life rafts. The scratching stops. You lie there for what feels like an eternity, your ears straining in the dark. Silence. A deep, profound silence. Maybe it was just your imagination after all. You begin to relax. Your heart begins to slow its frantic hammering. And then you hear it again. Closer this time. It is a whisper. A dry, sibilant sound, like dead leaves skittering across pavement. It is so quiet you can barely be sure you heard it at all. It is coming from the darkest corner of your room, from the space where the shadows are deepest. The whisper takes on a shape, a form. It is trying to say something. It is a voice, but not a voice. It is the sound of a throat that has not been used for speech in a very, very long time. It is a sound of pure, dry malice. And it is trying to say your name. It gets the first syllable right, a perfect, chilling imitation of the sound. And then it falters, as if it is still learning, still practicing. It tries again, the sound a wet, guttural clicking. This is not a dream. This is not your imagination. This is real. The story has followed you home. The thing we have been speaking of is here. It is in the room with you. It has been invited in by your curiosity. It has been drawn here by the sound of its own story. It hasn't come to harm you. Not yet. That is too simple, too quick. It has come to let you know that you are known. It has come to turn you from a listener into the one being listened to turn you from the observer into the observed. The fear is not that it will attack you. The fear is that it will never leave. The fear is that from now on, you will never ever be truly alone again. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow that moves in your peripheral vision, every whisper of the wind will now hold a new and terrible possibility. This is the real nature of the taboo. It is not a superstition. It is a law of nature you were not aware of, like gravity. Do not call out into the darkness, because something is always, always listening. Do not seek out the story, because the story is also seeking you. We have spent this time together in this shared, quiet space. We have learned its secrets, and in the learning we have drawn its attention. It has noticed us. It has noticed you. And so, this is where I must leave you. The telling is over. My voice will now fall silent, and you will be alone. Alone in your room, in the dark, with what you now know and with what now knows you. Listen carefully to the silence that comes next. Is it truly empty, or is it just waiting for you to open your eyes? The silence. Can you feel it now? The weight of it. It has a texture, a presence. It is not an absence of sound. It is a presence, a pressure against your eardrums, a thickness in the air of the room where you now sit. This is the silence that the story leaves behind. It is not an ending. It is an aftertaste, a resonance, a permanent haunting that settles deep in your bones. It is the quiet hum of a terrible new awareness that will never, ever leave you. Perhaps in the moments since my voice last spoke, you have tried to reason your way back to safety. You have convinced yourself that the fear you feel is just a phantom, a clever trick of storytelling, an illusion of atmosphere built from carefully chosen words and pregnant pauses. You have turned on the lights, flooding the room with a harsh, rational glare. You have checked the locks on the doors, reassuring yourself of their solid, mechanical reality. You have grounded yourself in the predictable world you knew before this began. You tell yourself over and over that you are safe, that the story is over, but the story is never over. It doesn't have an end. It just finds new people to tell itself to. It is patient, and it is hungry, and now it knows you. There is one last case to consider, a final thread in this dark tapestry. It is not an ancient legend or a second-hand account from a forgotten time. It is recent, it is quiet, it is digital, and it is unresolved. It concerns a young man, a product of our modern age of aggressive, performative skepticism. A debunker who frequented the strange, glowing corners of the internet dedicated to the paranormal, his posts and comments filled with a gleeful, arrogant contempt for belief in all its forms. He saw the stories of the Skinwalker as a particular challenge, a final boss in his personal war against superstition. He found the fear and the profound respect surrounding the legend to be not just irrational, but pathetic, an object worthy only of ridicule. He decided to make a point, to prove, once and for all, the toothlessness of this old, tired monster. He traveled to the border of the Navajo nation, to a remote stretch of land known to the locals as a place of bad power. A place they had warned him away from, not with anger, but with a quiet, pleading gravity in their faces, a look in their eyes that he mistook for ignorance. He saw their warnings not as genuine concern, but as a challenge to his enlightened, modern worldview. He set up a campsite, alone, in the very heart of the place they feared the most. And he began to broadcast. He live-streamed his experiment to the internet. His face, illuminated by the cold, blue, artificial light of his laptop screen, was a mask of smug confidence against the vast, primordial darkness of the desert behind him. He spent the night shouting the names into that darkness, the English name, the Diné names he had researched online, speaking them with a mocking, exaggerated reverence. He ridiculed the rituals he had read about. He laughed at the warnings he had been given, calling them the pathetic superstitions of a dying culture trying to cling to relevance. He performed a one-man show of defiance against the old ways, a monument to his own unshakable rationality. His small audience of like-minded followers online cheered him on, their comments a scrolling, disembodied chorus of mockery and encouragement from the safe, sterile comfort of their own homes, thousands of miles away. For hours, nothing happened. The desert was silent, save for the sound of his own voice echoing into the vast, indifferent emptiness and the chirping of crickets. The silence, he claimed, was proof of his victory. He declared his experiment a success. The old monster, he proclaimed with a triumphant sneer into the camera, was nothing but a story. A ghost of the past, utterly powerless against the bright light of modern reason. His last broadcast was just after midnight. He signed off with a final, dismissive laugh, promising to pack up in the morning and post a full, detailed report of the night's absolute, predictable lack of activity. He was never heard from again. When he failed to check in, his family, frantic with a worry that slowly curdled into dread, reported him missing. The local authorities, weary but professional, were called. They found his campsite a day later. It was eerily, unnaturally undisturbed. His tent was still standing, the flap zipped shut from the inside. His expensive phone and his laptop were there, lying on his sleeping bag, their batteries dead. His car was parked nearby, locked, the keys resting neatly on the driver's seat. Everything was in its place. Everything except him. The official investigation found no sign of a struggle, no blood, no footprints other than his own around the tent, no indication of a wild animal attack or human foul play. It was as if he had simply evaporated. There was just one strange, inexplicable detail that the lead investigator, a local man of Ute descent, noted in his private log before closing the official file. A detail that found its way into the hushed whispers of the local community, a story told now with even more gravity than before. A single set of footprints leading away from the campsite. They began at the opening of his tent, the clear, deep impressions of his own expensive, man-made hiking boots. But after 20 yards, as they moved out into the open desert, they began to change. The distinct geometric tread pattern began to smear, to melt into the dust, as if the rubber of the soles was becoming soft, becoming flesh. The shape of the prints morphed, step by agonizing step, into the tracks of a large, naked human foot. And a few yards after that, those human tracks morphed again. The toes elongated, the heel receded, the arch collapsed, and the print reshaped itself into the distinct, powerful impression of a massive canine. The long, loping tracks of a wolf or a coyote, heading out into the vast, empty desert until they were eventually lost in the wind-swept sand, disappearing into the immensity of the horizon. The official search was eventually called off. The case remains open, a cold file in a dusty cabinet. A story of a young man who went into the desert and was never seen again. A simple, tragic, and not uncommon story of misadventure. But the locals, the ones who had warned him, they know what happened. They know he did not just get lost. They know that he shouted a question into the darkness over and over with arrogance and contempt. And finally, something came to give him an answer. He did not vanish. He was collected. He was answered in a language far older and more final than his own. He went looking for a story, and he became one. This is the final lesson. This is the whisper that follows you out of the story and into the fabric of your own life. The desert watches, the desert listens, and the desert waits. You have listened. You have learned. You have walked this dark path with me to its very end, and now the knowledge is a part of you. It is not something you can unlearn. It is a quiet hum beneath the noise of your everyday life. a new awareness in the back of your mind, a new filter over your eyes that you can never remove. Perhaps you will only notice it in small ways at first, a shadow in your peripheral vision that seems to move with a purpose when you turn your head. The sudden, unsettling feeling of being watched when you are alone in your own home, a cold prickling on your skin that makes you turn around to face an empty room. The sudden, inexplicable, dead silence of the dogs in your neighborhood, a collective holding of breath that you never noticed before, but will now never be able to ignore again. A shape on the side of the road at night that looks for just a second too much like a man on all fours. Or perhaps in time, it will be more direct. Perhaps one night, weeks or months or even years from now, when the memory of my voice has faded to a distant echo, when you feel safe again, when you have convinced yourself it was all just a story, you will hear a scratching at your window, a sound like a single dry claw testing the glass with a patient, curious touch, or a soft, gentle knock at your door, so quiet, so polite that you can almost convince yourself you imagined it. Perhaps you'll hear a familiar voice, your mother's, your child's, your partner's, your own. Whisper your name from an empty room, a perfect, loving mimicry designed to test you, to see if you remember the rules of the game you have unwittingly joined. Now that you know, now that the story has been told to you, now that it knows you have been listening, the whisper will follow. It always does. It is patient. It has all the time in the world, and it is waiting for you, in the dark, just beyond the light, just at the edge of your hearing. It is waiting for a moment of weakness. It is waiting for you to forget. It is waiting for you to make a mistake. It is waiting for you to call out, just to see if it is still there. It is. It always will be. Waiting.